In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to build some more truth tables that get a little bit more complicated than the basic truth tables for compound statements. So first we're going to construct a truth table for the statement not P or Q. Okay, so when you look at your statement and you see that you have a P and a Q, then you know that you're going to have a P and a Q in your truth table. And when you have two simple statements in your compound statement, you know that there are four possible truth value combinations for P and Q. All right, so they could both be true, they could be true then false, false then true, or false then false. All right, now we can't just jump to this statement immediately. We have to build the parts that we need to make this statement. So I see that I'm going to need a not P, or the negation of P. So I'm going to make a column in my truth table for not P. Well, the negation of P means just change the truth values for the P column. True, when we negate it, will become false. True will become false. False will become true. False will become true. All right, so there's my column for not P. And now I can combine that with the Q and an or statement. So not P or Q. We're looking at these two columns here. Okay, and we're combining them with an or, which means in an or statement, as long as one part is true, it's going to come out true. So this one will be true. These are both false, so that's the only time an or statement is false. Here they're both true, so that comes out true. Here we have at least one true, so that comes out true. So this column is my answer column for the truth values for this statement. Okay, so let's try another one. Let's try P and not Q. All right, so again, we look at our statement. We see that we have two simple statements in this, P and Q. So again, we start our truth table with P and Q. And when we only have two simple statements in the compound statement, then there are four possibilities for truth values. True, 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 false, false, true, false, false. Okay. Now to make up this statement, you see that you're going to need a not Q. So let's go ahead and build a column for not Q. Okay. So not Q is the negation of Q. So we're just going to change the truth values in the Q column. So that will be false, true, false, true. All right. And then we can join the P and the not Q. It's a conjunction. So we're looking at the P column and the not Q column. All right, and in an and statement, the only time it's true is when both parts are true. So you can kind of come down these two columns and look to see if you have any where both are true. And you do right here. So that one's going to come out true. We don't have any other situations where they're both true. So the rest of them will come out false. Okay, let's get just a little bit more in depth. Okay, this is the negation of, or it is false that P, or if P, sorry, then not Q. Okay, so again, we just have P's and Q's, so we know how to get started. We'll make our columns for P's and Q's. You know, when there's only two simple statements in here, you're going to have four possibilities. True, 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 false, false, true, false, false. Okay, now, just like in any other math, if we have parentheses, we really need to do everything that's in those parentheses first, and then we'll come out here and worry about this. So, for this part in the parentheses, we know we're going to need a column for not Q. All right, so not Q, or the negation of Q, is just going to change the truth values in the Q column. So we're going to have false, true, false, true. All right, then we have a conditional statement here. If P, then not Q. All right, now a conditional statement is the only one where you have to be careful and pay attention to order. Thankfully, ours are lined up in the right order in our truth table. This one is first and this one is second, which is the order we want them in this conditional statement. Because in a conditional statement, it is only false when the first one is true and the second one is false. So right off the bat, we run into that scenario. True, then false makes this false. That's the only time a conditional statement is false. So let's go through and see if we have any more true than false. We don't. No. So that means all of these will be true. Now we're not finished yet because we've got to do the negation of this. So this last column, if I left room for it, squeeze it in here, is going to be the negation of this column, because it's the negation of that whole conditional statement. So that's going to be true, false, false, false. Okay? Let's do a couple more. All right, how about this one? P, if and only if, not P and Q. All right. So again, we still only have P's and Q's. So when we start to build our truth table, we will just have the 4 possibilities for truth values. True, 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 false, false, true, false, false. All right. Let's start in the parentheses and see if we can get that part built first. We see that we're going to need a not P. So I'm going to make a column for not P. That's going to change the truth values in the P column. So that'll be false, false, true, true. Then I need to join that with the Q in a conjunction, an and statement. So now I'm looking at this and this, okay, to build this one. All right, we're joining these with and an and or a conjunction is only true when they're both true. So here we have true, true, so that one's going to come out true. That's the only one where they're both true, so the rest will be false. All right, then I need to join the P if and only if this statement. That's a biconditional. Okay, so I'm going to get a different color for this one. All right, so now I'm looking at this column and this column to build this. Okay, so this and this joined by the biconditional, and the biconditional is only true when these two parts have the same truth value. So here they do not, here they do not, here they do not, but here they do, okay? When they have the same truth value, it doesn't matter if it's true or false. If they're the same, the biconditional is true. So that's the only one that will be true. The rest of these will be false. All right, now we're going to look at a couple where we have 3 simple statements making up our compound statement, P, Q, and R. And what do we do in that case? All right, so here we have P and Q, or not R. Okay, so when you have P's, Q's, and R's, or 3 simple statements, you're going to have several more possibilities. In fact, you're going to have 8 possibilities for the truth values of P, Q, and R. Now again, The order that you put these in, the possibilities, does not technically matter, but I find that it's easier if you will kind of memorize a way to list them so you know you're not leaving any out, and then it's easier to do it the same way every time. Okay, so the way I do it is I put 4 trues in the P column and 4 falses, because there are going to be 4 possible scenarios where P is true and 4 where P is false. And then, because I've kind of already memorized these 4 scenarios, I list those in the Q and R column, and I do it twice. So I'm going to go true, 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 false, false, true, false, false. And then I'm going to do it again. True, 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 false, false, true, false, false. And that will give you all 8 possibilities for the different truth values for P, Q, and R. All right, so once you have that part, then you start on your statement. I'm going to start with my parentheses, and I'm going to go ahead and make a column for P and Q. All right, so for P and Q, we're looking at our P and our Q to make this one. All right, an and statement is only true when they're both true. So this first one, they're both true. The second one, they're both true. I do not think we have another one where they're both true. All right, so the rest of the other 6 possibilities will be false. Okay, now I'm going to need a not R column. Okay, the not R, or the negation of R, is going to change the truth values of the R column. So if you look at the R column, it goes true, false, true, false, true, false, true, false. So not R will be false, true, false, true, false, true, false, true. And then last, we will join this and this with OR. Okay, so let me write the final statement here. P and Q, or not R. We want to make sure we're looking at the right columns. We're going to look here and here to build this. It's OR, and OR is true as long as at least one part is true. Okay, so the only time an OR is going to be false is when they're both false. All right, so here we've got at least one part true. That's true. Here we're true. These are both false, so that's going to be false. Here, as long as we have one true, we're good for true. Both false makes it false. This one will be true. Both false makes it false. And this one will be true. And this is your answer column. All right, let's do one more with P's, Q's, and R's. How about P or if Q, then R? Okay, so again, right when you see that you have P's, Q's, and R's, you know that in your truth table, you're going to have 8 scenarios or 8 possible scenarios instead of 4. Let me remind you how we fill this in. For how I do it, I do 4 trues in the P column and then 4 falses. All right. Then I come back up, and in my Q and my R column, I write true, 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 false, false, true, false, false. And then I repeat that. True, 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 false, false, true, false, false. Okay, I'm going to start with my parentheses, and I'm going to build a column for if Q, then R. The conditional. Make sure you're looking at the right 2 over here, Q and R. Now a conditional statement is only false when it goes true then false. Okay, so I see one right there. True then false is going to be false. So let me see if I see any other ones. Here's one. True then false is going to be false. That's the only time a conditional is false. So we can go ahead through and fill in the rest with true. And now we can combine that with P in a disjunction, an or statement. Let's see, we're looking at the P, we're looking at if Q then R to build this. We're putting them together with or. See that there? Now an or statement is true as long as one part is true, or at least one part is true. So here we have them both true, that will come out true. We've got at least one part true right here. So that's going to be true. They're both true here, so that's going to be true. They're both true here, so that's going to be true. We've got a true. There's one where they're both false, so that's going to be false. And then we've got a true in that one, and we've got a true in that one. Okay, so there are some examples of how to build true tables that are a little bit more complicated. If you want to learn about tautologies and self-contradictions, then you should watch the next video.